It starts like any other morning. The streets are alive with the quiet rhythm of routine, coffee brewing in kitchens, traffic humming in the distance, notifications buzzing on phones. And then, without warning, every device, every screen, every channel goes black and displays the same stark message: nuclear strike detected. Seek immediate shelter. In that instant, the world as you know it changes. The calm you took for granted is gone, replaced by a wave of uncertainty and fear. You don't yet hear the explosion. You don't yet see the fireball, but the simulation has already begun. For this scenario, we strip away politics and speculation. We focus on the hard numbers and the physical realities. The model is based on a single 500 kiloton nuclear warhead, far larger than those dropped in 1945. Yet smaller than the largest in today's arsenals, it detonates 1,500 feet above a major metropolitan area, with a population of roughly 4 million people. The day is clear, the wind moderate. These details matter, because in nuclear physics, the environment can decide who lives and who dies. The detonation is instantaneous. A blinding flash erupts, brighter than anything the human eye has evolved to handle. In the center, concrete vaporizes, steel liquefies. Temperatures climb beyond the surface of the sun. The core of the city is erased before the sound wave even has time to form. Within a mile of ground zero, survival is impossible. It's not about bad luck. It's about the sheer force of energy, the crushing overpressure, and the debris moving faster than any human could react to. Then the shockwave arrives, racing outward faster than the speed of sound. It flattens buildings, rips trees from the ground, and sends shards of glass slicing through the air miles away. Fires erupt instantly, not just in buildings, but in vehicles, clothing, and dry vegetation. Those caught in the open within 3 miles suffer severe burns in less than a second. At the same time, an electromagnetic pulse radiates outward, frying unshielded electronics across an even larger area. Traffic lights, cell towers, radios, and emergency systems fail in silence. But the destruction isn't finished. The explosion sends millions of tons of pulverized debris into the atmosphere. This debris is radioactive, and as it drifts back down, it becomes fallout, an invisible, deadly rain carried by the wind for tens of miles. You could be 15 or 20 miles from the blast, entirely untouched by the fire or shockwave, and still face a fatal radiation dose if you remain exposed. Shelter becomes the only meaningful defense. Thick concrete, packed earth, underground tunnels, or the reinforced basements of older buildings can cut radiation exposure dramatically. Even so, protection is a race against time. Radiation is most dangerous in the first 48 hours after detonation, dropping off quickly afterward but remaining hazardous for days. In those opening minutes of our simulation, what survives is painfully selective. Deep underground bunkers remain intact. Certain subway systems on the outer edges of the blast zone are spared structural collapse. Some basements in residential neighborhoods, shielded by dense surrounding structures, still stand. But the heart of the city is gone. Above-ground transit networks, major bridges, and most communication infrastructure are either obliterated or crippled beyond repair. And in the areas just outside the blast zone, survival hinges on knowing when to stay put and when to move. Decisions that must be made without the luxury of clear information. The sobering truth is that in the first stage of a nuclear strike, survival is determined almost entirely by location, shielding, and immediate response. There's no outrunning the blast. There is only the choice to be ready before it happens. What comes next is not the roar of fire. It's the silence that follows. In that silence, the clock starts ticking again. The next decisions, made in the hours that follow, will decide whether the survivors of the blast remain survivors in the days to come. That's where our simulation goes next. The blast fades, but the danger does not. In the first hour after detonation, the city is unrecognizable. Smoke columns rise into the atmosphere, blending with the mushroom-shaped cloud that now defines the skyline. Fires rage in every direction, fed by ruptured gas lines, ignited vehicles, and burning debris. The sound is a mix of distant sirens, collapsing structures, and, in some places, an eerie stillness where no one is left to make noise, survivors in the outer blast zones are faced with a stark reality. They are alive, but they are not yet safe. For those close enough to see the cloud forming, that shape is not just a symbol, it's a warning. The debris lifted high into the air will soon return to Earth as radioactive fallout. Invisible to the eye, it will settle on rooftops, roads, and open ground, clinging to clothing, hair, and skin. The wind determines who is in immediate danger. In our simulation, the moderate breeze carries fallout downwind for dozens of miles. Within this corridor, radiation levels spike to lethal doses in under an hour. Those outdoors without proper shielding risk absorbing enough radiation to cause acute radiation sickness. Vomiting, weakness, confusion, symptoms that can appear in minutes and at high doses can be fatal within days. The instinct for many will be to flee, but movement in this window is a gamble. Roads are blocked by debris, traffic signals are dead, and vehicles that survive the blast may still fail if the EMP has damaged onboard electronics. Without prior planning, evacuation becomes a dangerous crawl through hazardous terrain, with no guarantee of finding a safer zone before the fallout catches up. Sheltering is, for most, the better option. Thick concrete walls, multiple floors of structure above you, or the packed soil of a basement can reduce radiation exposure dramatically. Staying indoors, away from windows and outer walls, is critical. Improvised barriers, furniture, books, heavy materials, can add valuable shielding if you are in a lighter structure. The key is time. Every hour spent in a shielded space reduces the risk as radiation levels decay. Meanwhile, the infrastructure that modern life depends on begins to collapse. Power grids go dark. Cellular networks remain silent. Water pressure drops as pumps fail, and in some cases, pipes rupture entirely. In neighborhoods near the blast, the air itself becomes dangerous, thick with dust, smoke, and microscopic radioactive particles. Those without masks or improvised coverings for the nose and mouth risk inhaling contaminants directly into their lungs. Hospitals that survive structurally are quickly overwhelmed. The injured pour in faster than any emergency plan can handle, and medical supplies dwindle within hours. Burns, fractures, lacerations, and radiation sickness all demand immediate attention, but staff face the same fallout dangers as their patients. Without decontamination facilities, even treating the injured can spread radioactive particles indoors. Communication becomes a precious commodity. In the absence of phones or internet, survivors turn to battery-powered radios, if they have them, to receive official instructions. In our simulation, emergency broadcasts advise sheltering in place, sealing windows and vents, and avoiding travel unless ordered by authorities. These messages are blunt. The outside environment is lethal, and moving without protection is a death sentence. In the first 24 hours, survival is less about resourcefulness and more about restraint. The safest course for most is to stay hidden from the world outside, conserving energy, preserving clean food and water, and waiting for radiation levels to drop. It's a period defined not by action, but by endurance, a test of patience as much as preparation. But this still isn't the full picture. Even as radiation begins to fade after the second day, a new wave of challenges is approaching. Supplies will run out. Civil order will strain under the weight of fear and uncertainty. And the environment itself, damaged, unstable, and unpredictable, will dictate who can move, where they can go, and what they will face next. That's where our simulation turns next. The days and weeks after the strike, when the survivors must decide how to live in a world that has just been torn apart. By the end of the first week, the mushroom cloud is gone from the skyline, but its effects linger in every breath of air, every sip of water, and every cautious step survivors take. The fires that burned and checked in the city core have either consumed their fuel or smoldered into ash, leaving behind a skeletal ruin. The once familiar streets are now unrecognizable. Twisted metal, scorched vehicles, collapsed buildings. Radiation levels have dropped enough in many areas for limited movement outdoors, but safe is a relative term. Hotspots remain. especially in zones where fallout particles settled heavily. Without a Geiger counter or dosimeter, survivors cannot know if the ground beneath their feet is harmless or lethal. Some venture out too soon, desperate for supplies, and never return. Food becomes the most immediate crisis. In the early days, canned goods, sealed packages, and bottled water sustained those who stocked up or were lucky enough to find unlooted stores. But as days turn into weeks, these supplies dwindle. Fresh food is scarce. Crops in fallout zones are unsafe to eat, contaminated by radioactive dust that clings to leaves and seeps into soil. Animals, too, may carry contamination, and consuming them without proper testing risks spreading internal radiation poisoning. Water is another fragile lifeline. Municipal supplies are unreliable, many treatment plants are offline, and pipes near the blast are ruptured. Rainwater can be collected, but in the first weeks, it may carry radioactive particles from the atmosphere. Survivors resort to boiling water or using makeshift filtration, though neither fully removes radioactive isotopes. The healthiest water sources are those stored indoors before the strike or drawn from deep sealed wells. Medical care is virtually non-existent outside of improvised clinics. Antibiotics, painkillers, and bandages become precious commodities traded like currency. Minor injuries that would have been treatable in peacetime now risk infection and death. Radiation sickness remains a constant shadow. Symptoms can develop weeks after exposure, and many will not survive without advanced treatment that no longer exists locally. The social fabric begins to fray. In some pockets, survivors band together, pooling resources and setting up watch rotations to guard against looters or rival groups. In others, fear and scarcity fuel conflict. Firearms, once for hunting or home defense, become tools of negotiation and survival. Government presence, if it exists, is sporadic. Occasionally, military convoys appear, sometimes distributing supplies, sometimes enforcing evacuations. These encounters bring both relief and unease, as survivors are ordered into relocation zones without explanation of where they are going or how long they will stay. For many, the choice is stark. Trust the officials who arrive, or remain in a contaminated but familiar territory. Psychologically, the weeks after the blast are as dangerous as the physical threats. The silence at night is heavy, broken only by the wind or distant, unexplained sounds. The absence of news of certainty erodes morale. Survivors replay the moment of the strike in their minds, wondering why they lived when so many others did not. And yet, some begin to adapt. They learn which buildings offer the best shelter from lingering radiation. They map the locations of unlooted warehouses, discover underground parking garages with intact vehicles, find high ground to spot approaching strangers. In this stage of the simulation, survival shifts from endurance to adaptation. The blast and fallout are no longer the primary killers. Now it is hunger, dehydration, infection, and human desperation that decide who lives and who doesn't. But even this is not the end. Beyond the city, beyond the immediate blast zone, the world is changing in ways survivors cannot yet see. Trade routes, governments, alliances, all have been shaken. And in the shadow of the first strike, the question no one wants to ask is the one that matters most. Was this the only attack, or just the beginning? That's where our final part takes us, the long-term aftermath. The reshaping of life itself, and what it truly means to survive in the nuclear age. Months have passed since the strike. The city that once stood as a hub of life is now a scar on the landscape, visible from miles away. Nature has begun to reclaim some areas, weeds growing through cracked pavement, birds returning cautiously, but the heart of the blast zone remains lifeless, a wasteland of rubble and twisted metal. Radiation has diminished to safer levels in many places, but certain areas remain dangerously hot. These pockets of contamination may persist for decades, invisible to the eye yet lethal to those who linger. Signs and makeshift markers warn of the danger, though time will eventually erase even these, leaving future wanderers to stumble into peril unknowingly. For survivors, the rhythm of life has changed completely. There's no going back. Cities that were untouched by the strike are under their own strains. Economic collapse, refugee influxes, and the ripple effects of disrupted trade. Fuel, medicine, and food are all scarce. Currency has lost value in some regions, replaced by barter systems where clean water, antibiotics, or even batteries hold more worth than cash. Communities that formed in the early weeks have either strengthened into organized settlements or splintered under the weight of mistrust. In the stronger groups, leadership emerges, and survival skills once considered niche, hunting, foraging, carpentry, medical care, become essential professions. Children, if they are still in the community, grow up without the memory of pre-strike life. For them, this reality is not a disaster. It is simply the world as it is. Beyond survival, there is the slow and difficult question of rebuilding. Some settlements send scouting teams into the ruins, salvaging materials and searching for overlooked caches of supplies. Others focus on self-sufficiency, planting crops in uncontaminated soil, and digging wells deep enough to avoid fallout pollution. Governments, those that remain intact, begin long-term recovery plans. In some areas, they enforce exclusion zones, designating large swaths of land as permanently off-limits. In others, they attempt reconstruction, but progress is slow. Infrastructure cannot simply be repaired. It must be rebuilt from the ground up, with new systems hardened against the possibility of another strike. The environment, too, carries lasting scars. The blast's thermal energy scorched earth and vaporized structures, releasing not just radiation, but toxic chemicals from countless destroyed materials. Rivers near the strike site may carry pollutants downstream for years, affecting agriculture and wildlife far beyond the immediate zone. Psychologically, the impact is profound and generational. The survivors carry memories of that morning, the flash, the shockwave, the knowledge that life could change forever in an instant. Even in safer areas, every distant boom or unusual light in the sky triggers unease. Preparedness becomes part of the culture, passed down as habit rather than fear. Stockpiles of food and water, practiced evacuation routes, knowledge of shelter locations. And yet, despite the destruction, humans adapt. In the ruins, small green shoots of life, literal and figurative, begin to appear. Markets return, even if they are makeshift and outdoors. People trade stories as much as goods. There are moments of laughter, of shared meals, of rebuilding not just homes, but a sense of community. The simulation ends here, but its lesson remains. Survival in a nuclear strike is not just about the moment of impact. It is about preparation before, endurance during, and adaptation after. The question of what survives and what doesn't is answered not only by physics, but by human resilience. In the shadow of such an event, no one is untouched. The world reshapes itself around the scar, and those who remain must decide what to build on that altered ground. The strike changes everything, but it does not end everything.